Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome from Town Hall Europe, the conference centre of Friends of Europe, where I have the pleasure to co-moderate tonight's debate. I'm joined in London by Elena Sanz-Fihan, my colleague at Friends of Europe, and it's our pleasure, first of all, to welcome all of you who have joined us, some of you on Zoom and some of you via live streaming. We have a full house tonight, and I'm sure that this is fully justified given the interest of the debate and the excellence of the five speakers that we have. Before I begin on the substance, let me first thank the Brussels International Centre, which is our partner in organising tonight's special event, and let me also thank Chris Irons and his technical team who have worked to make all of these very good preparations. What is tonight's subject? It's 20 years since the UN Security Council adopted Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security. Now, if you go out into the streets of Brussels or anywhere else and ask people to name a UN Security Council resolution, they probably would be hard put. But I'm sure that if you did get an answer, it would undoubtedly be 1325. One of the few UN resolutions that's really achieved widespread public consciousness, which has what journalists call push-through capability in going beyond the narrow circle of diplomats and experts who work on these resolutions to have some kind of outreach into the broad public. And that's because 1325 takes up an extremely important subject, which is how can women be better protected in armed conflicts, against violence, including sexual violence, and also how can women be more featured, as they should be, naturally, in leadership roles in international peace and security, because the best people to protect women are undoubtedly women, and that's not going to be possible if this area remains one that is dominated by men. And therefore, for tonight, we need to look back over 20 years since UN Security Council Resolution 1325 was adopted and ask ourselves, did it really make a difference? Was it alone the driving force here, or were other things important? And if it did produce not simply awareness, but action, was the action durable? Was there enough action? And was it the right kind of action? And secondly, as we look to the next 20 years, do we need another UN Security Council Resolution 1325, a successor for the next stage of the process, or is the one that we have already good enough? And does it still offer potential for further implementation? So in other words, what has been achieved? Where has it been achieved? But what is now the agenda for the 20 years ahead? We have, as I've said, five excellent speakers, two who are going to give a perspective from the ground, and three who will represent later on this evening the three key international organizations, the United Nations, the European Union and NATO, that are working in this field. And we have five speakers who are not only experts, but they are also role models, they are also leaders in this field, and they speak with the authority which I'm sure has attracted all of you in the audience to join us for this evening's debate. Just a quick word of housekeeping before I hand over to Elena to introduce the speakers. If you're on Zoom and you want to ask a question later on, please, by the way, make your question short and snappy so that we can have as many questions as possible. Please put your full name on the system and raise your hand. If you're on live stream, then please ask your question via Twitter and the hashtag Friends, FOE, Friends of Europe, FOE debate. We'll try to get as many questions in as we can. So again, delighted to be here this evening, and now I pass over to Elena to introduce our first two speakers and to get our debate started.
Hi all. Thank you, Jamie, for the introduction, and thank you all for joining us today. So as Jamie was saying, we're very lucky to have the panel we have today. We have a very diverse and rich panel, people who've been working relentlessly to promote the women, peace and security agenda. So we have Rosa Emilia Salamanca, Ilot Mutaka, Charlotte Isaacson, Claire Hutchinson, and Pavika Nestor today. I will first introduce our two first speakers and will give you a short time, a 10-minute time to get your questions to them, and then I will introduce the other three speakers, and you will also have the opportunity to ask questions and interact with them. So our first speaker is Rosamilia Salamanca. Rosamilia is director at FIACE. FIACE is a peace-building organization in Colombia that works to promote the role of women and also works to defend women's rights. She is also part of Coalition 1325. That is a women's network in Colombia that advocates for a Colombian national action plan on women, peace, and security. So, Rosa Emilia, you have been at the forefront of the women, peace, and security agenda. You have been promoting the role of women in the Colombian peace negotiations. You have actually been part of these negotiations. So what I would like to hear from you today is, how do you see the current situation in Colombia? How has the COVID-19 crisis affected the implementation of this peace agreement? And how has it particularly affected the situation of women peace builders and also human rights defenders?
Well, thank you so much, Elena. It is very nice to be here. Thank you so much for this invitation. So I want to be very precise in what I am going to say. First, as I always say, women, the Colombian women's movement was the one that really impacted the peace agreement. It is a huge movement, is a diverse movement, is a movement full of very good leaders and a very strong movement in Colombia. And that is something that I will always try to highlight, because it has not been a work of one person, two person, it has been a huge work of many women. So saying so, I have to say that in these 20 years of the Agenda 1325 has signified very much for the Colombian, for our own movement, as we have appropriated of the 1325, and then taking the 1325 as ours, we really did a lot of actions to impact the agreement in participation and putting language and content in this agreement. This is important because, as we all know, this is one of the agreements that have more gender provisions in the world, is an example. But nevertheless, we have done this incredible work. We have lots of difficulties or challenges to implement the agreement. And I think that in the context of COVID, it has been even more challenging. As you know, we have this agreement and we are trying to find the enough budget to make this agreement and all the provisions, gender and others, to be implemented in Colombia. But then we have two big challenges. One is to have really the political will, and second, the funding that will take us along with this incredible possibility. In that sense, when COVID-19 appeared, that means that we came to a crisis where the structural conflicts that in Colombia persist, like poverty, like a complicated situation of health, like a lot of violences all over the country, like still remaining conflicts, etc., came and just booked up in a very strong way, because we are a country that has one of the most incredible index of inequality in Latin America and even in the world. So you know that Latin America is one of the continents that have less equality, less redistribution. So COVID has shown us that this is very complicated for a country that is in conflict. So then comes all the discussion if the money must go to the COVID effect, or it must go to peace, or what can we do if we don't have enough money for everything. So it begins to have a very strong tension between where to allocate the money, if we should allocate it in peace or we should allocate it in the crisis. And I think that is a very complicated and false dilemma, because of course we need to build peace and we have to make wider our idea of peace, because peace, although it has to do with conflicts, it also have to do with a secure environment. And that is what women have been asking for, to change and to move forward with the idea of another kind of perception of security. So we really think that security must change, and security means health security, and it means violence against women security that has arisen in a very incredible way in all this pandemic scenario. And now we have feminicides and we have lots of violence in our different homes because of poverty, because of many things, and because of all the violence we are having in the society. But also, we have seen continuously the attack against the human rights defenders, women and men, and the attacks to peace builders. So I think that one of the challenges that 1325 and all the connected women's peace and security agenda is to really understand that peace have different, that peace is something that you build all the time, as women say, all the time, everywhere, in your private and public scenarios, in everywhere, and that it means that you have to have political will, you have to have enough funding to do so, and to give the people the opportunity to change the situation in the countries, to defeat poverty and fear, and also to make the possibility to see that you, and from people you can arise another ways of seeing security, and to implement security from the women's perspective. So this is one of the things that I think that is challenging now the 1325 and all the women's peace and security, especially in Latin America, where we have an extreme violence, as you know. And then I think that it is quietly important for the women's peace and security agenda to focus in all the economical issues. We think that really, if we don't have another perspective for economical inclusion, it is very difficult to have peace. It's very difficult. And for women, it means that if you don't have economical issues to, to have more autonomy, to have more independence, to have more uh, possibilities to have a word for themselves, it is even more difficult for ex-combatants, for women that are in the villages that have such a big context of violence. It is very difficult um, to really get over all the violence that they have inside or outside the conflict. So I want to show this very brief context of what is happening now. But then to end, I think that the Colombian women's movement have sent a letter to the Security Council saying that if we had one of the most important gender provisions as in an agreement, it should be one of the cases of gender that must be seen and taken account, and just look what is happening very closely to this agreement and to these gender provisions in this agreement. So we also would like to ask for the support of the international community to really make one of Colombia, one of the gender cases of the informal experts gender group in the Security Council. Thank you so much, Alen.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Rosa Emilia, for your insights. It's very interesting to see what's happening in Colombia. And as you say, that the women, peace, and security agenda is not only about including women, but also about protecting and advocating for solving those social economical situations that prevent women from being more implicated in women in peace and security. And as you were talking about sexual and gender-based violence, I think our next speakers can shed a lot of light on this. We have following, we have Ilot Mutaka. He is the international program manager for Ghana and Liberia at the Swedish Association for Sexual Education. So Ilot has 20 years experience working on sexual and gender-based violence in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Ilot, you have implemented and you have worked on different initiatives, local initiatives, to advocate and prevent sexual violence in conflict affected regions. So from you, what I would like to know is what is your experience? What challenges have you faced when trying to prevent sexual violence in conflict? And also, what do you think that what support do people who are on the field working on these aspects need from us to be well supported?
Thank you very much, Elena, for giving me the floor. Um, Hello to all our participants to this panel. And as you said, I'm from the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, and I've been working there for almost 20 years. And now I'm working in Sweden as international program manager for RFSU. And just to give a little bit the context of the country, is that Congo has a very long story of unrest and war and of instability, and also um, there are so many issues related to the state. The state is still fragile, and there are so many problems related to that when it comes to security forces. So, as I said, I come from the eastern part of the country, and as you may know, the eastern part of the country has more than 100 active armed groups or rebel groups. And these rebel groups are really creating, let's say, they are really committing crime, they are killing all the time, every day, even today, people will die. So women and girls, and also now some men are facing serious threats related to rape and sexual violence. And so in this context, I think it's somehow difficult to operate for many of us. And what we have tried to do, because at that time I was working as an executive director of the Congo Men's Network. Also, I was part of the team of one of the projects that was led by Gender Force, which is a UK organization based in Brussels. And then we were working mostly on prevention of sexual violence and rape in war-affected zones. So our work was mostly to, let's say, uh, engage and mobilize security forces, the national police and the national army. That is one side, and the other side, we were also working with armed groups to try to, to bring them on the table and try to discuss on how we can prevent better sexual violence before it happens. Because as you may know, is that more attention was being given to protection. And when we talk about protection, we look at response. So there were so many resources allocated to response, but when it comes to prevention, I think it's still a challenge up to now. So our approach was quite unique because we were working with people who are involved in creating instability, creating insecurity, trying to also work with them on issues related to masculinity, because it's also a problem in our army, where men are in the army, for instance, or in armed groups, but they are still men the way they have been educated in their families, in their societies, in the church, at school, and everywhere else. So our work was mostly to engage through a set of community mobilization techniques, and I think we were really like gaining already trust from both parties. when I say both parties, it's the government side and the rebel group side. So we were always going to for instance, to the battlefield where different parties are engaging in conflict, and try to serve as watchdogs, try to make sure that any woman is raped during conflict. So there are so many challenges related to that, and one of the challenges also is that first of all, Congo is a fragile country, and there is a lack of political will to, yes, let's say, to reinforce the army, to reinforce the national police. And to be honest, is that these two institutions are not working as they were supposed to do. And I don't see any single woman or any single man victim of any type of violence to go to the national police or to the army to say, this is what I'm facing. So it's still a problem. And for me, I think that women are paying, let's say, are paying the price of this conflict, because people are trying to say that cases of rape are decreasing. For me, it's not the case. When it comes to counting the numbers and cases, it's increasing every week, every month, about 20%. Unfortunately, I think we are not able to talk openly that this is what is happening. And so this was mostly our work, and the context. And also, I think we have learned a lot of lessons, is that when you go to these villages and rural areas, even in certain cities, is that all the women, all the men, they just tell you the only thing that we need is security. Once we have security, we can be able to develop ourselves, we can be able to reconcile, we can be able to do whatever. So it's really like security is the most needed, let's say, ingredient in this conflict. And I think as security is part of the UN Security 1325, I think there is a need to let's say to see at that side and try to think a little bit on how to reinforce security for women, men, all these people who are caught in battlefields for different parties. Another lesson is also that many people don't know about the UN Security 1325, and it's causing not only a problem in terms of knowledge, but also in terms of implementation. So if you go, for instance, to Congo, you'll find that people can talk about the resolution itself in let's say, in urban areas like big cities, but when you go to rural areas, no one knows about. No one knows about. And what can we recommend then? So I think from the challenges that I've been talking about here, there is a need first for the Security Council to, yes, to give clear instructions to the United Nations mission deployed in Congo, because you'll see that when it comes, for instance, to women's participation in the peacekeeping mission, there are less women among troops deployed in Congo. Of course, we understand that it's due to the fact that contributing countries are not sending too many women, but we need women because we have seen also that all these troops where it's mixed women and men, they are really helping a lot to prevent sexual violence in conflict. I think another recommendation is also now to start allocating resources for improving security, not only with state, let's say, state bodies. It's also important to start thinking about how do we engage other security actors in fighting rape, in sexual violence, in fight. I'm sorry, in fighting rape and sexual violence in conflict settings. And the last one, I think it's time for all of us as actors at different levels to, yes, to be conscious, to be aware of the problems that people are facing in conflict areas. They have no one to talk on behalf of them. They are just there. And look at the Eastern Congo, for instance. There is no way actors are able to go to all these villages affected by rape and sexual violence in conflict. So who's speaking on behalf of these people? No one. So all things that we are speaking most of the time is not really representing the voices of women who are affected by sexual violence and rape in conflict and war. So I think this is what I have to share for today. Thank you, and your questions and comments are more than welcome. Thank you.
So
Thank
thank
you,
you
Rosa.
very much, Ilo. We will now pass to Jamie so he can introduce the questions from all of our
Elena, what we're going to do, given the time, is we'll have the questions at the end. So please, those of you who want to ask a question, please send them in so that we can have a round of Q&A at the end. Elena, I'll pass back to you so that we can go directly to our second panel, second group of speakers, and for you to introduce the speakers. Q&A as we come to the end. Thank you.
Okay, no problem then. So our third speaker is Charlotte Isaacson. She is the Senior Gender Advisor at the European External Action Service. Charlotte has worked on women, peace and security related issues for a long time. She was one of the first ones to do it. She's worked at the national level, serving as gender advisor at the Swedish Armed Forces, but also at the international level, she's worked as gender advisor for NATO, and now she's in her current position at the External Action Service. So my question for you, Charlotte, would be, as you have been working for several years in the Women, Peace and Security agenda, and with so many different hats, I would like to have from you an overview of what do you think has changed during the past 20 years, so after the adoption of Resolution 1325, but also know what do you think that needs to change? What obstacles have you found in your way to complete this objective?
Yeah, thank you very much. So I did this for a long time, and I started in the military, as just was explained. And given those 18 years now, I worked on women, peace and security. So many things have happened. So when I started, every time you met a new commander or military general or whatever, they were quite curious and surprised or quite questioning even, and asked, why should I have a gender advisor? Why do we even need to do this? While today, if a commander sometimes do not get this capacity in his staff, he will come to us and ask, where is my gender expert? I need to have a person who can work on women, peace and security. So of course that in itself is a great achievement in these years. And also we have structures, we have policies, we have action plans, we have a political, outspoken, very strong commitment in all existing organizations, not at least in the European Union, where I work now in the External Action Service. So everything of that is in place. But we also know that policy frameworks in place are not making necessarily the things happening where we would like them to happen, like in conflict and post-conflict settings. So of course the challenge is for all of us, we know, on the implementation, and we know that because we read the Secretary General's reports and we read other reports. We read the wealth of academic literature on women, peace and security, which is all out there. So we do know that in terms of achieving the objectives, we have still a very long way to go. But at the same time, we have training centers, we have trainings, we have courses, we have concepts, we have academic women, peace and security centers. So there is quite a lot in place. So in that regard, one could say that the glass is half full, or some people would even say full. At the same time, we know that from Kennedy's famous speech on going to the moon, it took almost exactly 7 years on the day before actually there were people on the moon. So in light of that, those 7 years compared to these 20 years, of course, one can also think about what could have been done differently or more or increased in terms of getting closer to the objectives we everyone repeatedly say that we want to achieve. So we know that this is at the same time there are many challenges persisting still, and I think that the women, peace and security agenda is also very broad. It's very complex. It's very many things. It's also then consists of many different smaller communities of practice working on different parts of the women, peace and security agenda. So we might speak about it as one conceptualized thing, but that's not really true, because some people are working with women mediators, and that is very important, while others work with recruiting more women to security forces or military and police, and those two communities might not necessarily meet each other or speak about these things. So it's quite, I would say, quite still a fragmented field, which is both a blessing and a challenge, I would say. So we still have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of things to do within this, we can call it social field or community or practice, to understand the whole concept and see how things are related to each other. And I would say that if we split it up, women, peace, and security, those people working with those three things come from completely different backgrounds, and many of them never meet each other, they never speak with each other, and even if they would come into the same room, they wouldn't even understand each other, because even a simple thing as the understanding of security, what that means, and then security for whom, and who should decide, and who can securitize and who cannot, it's still under debate, it's under argument. So we are touching upon also other areas of contestation and debate and argumentation. And I think we need to just be very aware of that. What we need to do is to rethink whether we are doing the right things and whether we are doing it right. I think we need also to think very closely who is guiding, or whose voices are listened to, whose voices are heard, whose voices are understood, who has the possibility to produce knowledge, whose knowledge is important, whose knowledge and experience is perhaps not that important. And these questions might be, might reveal some, it will be further argumentation, but these discussions are important because in the end of the day, this agenda is to strengthen and support people affected by conflict, and in relation to what is happening both before and during and after conflict.
Okay.
So we did a lot, we came far, but we still have very, very much of work to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you. Eleanor, back to you, please. Eleanor, can you unmute?
Yeah.
Go.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. It is true that when we talk about women, peace, and security agenda, we talk as a general topic, but of course, there's so many different things that fall within one topic that it's very difficult to address. And as you were saying, whose voices are heard, I think it also made the same, plea that he thinks some voices aren't heard. So that's a very interesting point. Our next speaker has also been working on the Women, Peace and Security agenda for very long. So Claire Hutchinson, you are a NATO Secretary General Special Representative for Women, Peace and Security. And also prior to that, you worked as Senior Gender Advisor with the United Nations for over a decade. So you are also in the leader of the team that put together the new 2018 NATO Policy and Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security. What we would like to hear from you is how is NATO implementing this plan, and also what challenges have you faced, and what is the way forward? How do you see the future of the Women, Peace and Security agenda?
Great. Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. I'm so pleased to be with my dear friends and colleagues from many years. I feel very old when I say that. What I think, first of all, has changed quite a lot over the last 20 years is that Resolution 1325 is no longer an only child, that she is one of many sisters, and of the family of 10, the Women, Peace and Security agenda has changed dramatically because it has really broadened and widened the frame for women, peace and security, which has brought in other areas. And if you look at the trajectory of the resolutions, the languaging, the way it's narrated, the way we look at women, peace and security has become stronger and stronger and stronger. When I first started out working in this agenda back 2002, 2003, you couldn't pull people kicking and screaming to a conference on it. And now we have that many conferences and conversations. And the collective of the resolutions is really where NATO has grounded itself. We have been doing this for quite a long time. We've been doing it. Charlotte, as my colleague knows, who was worked with us. This isn't new to us. But in 2018, we adapted and revised our action plan and policy to incorporate 3 new principles. And they are the principles that we hold dear and are priority for us in terms of the work that we do. And the 3 principles are, we call them 3 I's. And what we did was translate the Women, Peace and Security resolutions and their principles and made it into our own, which I think is very important to do when you want to make something and have ownership within any organization. You have to really translate it into your own context. And so for us, the 3 I's are the I of integration, the I of inclusiveness, and the I of integrity. And on integration, for us, it means that women, peace and security has to go across all of the work that we do, be it from cyber to countering terrorism, to defense investment, to defense planning. It is across the spectrum of security. And that is where we place a lot of our emphasis. How do we integrate the gender perspective? How do we do the gender analysis? How do we bring that on board? And I would agree with the previous speaker that 1325 on its own and women, peace and security is not fully known. And how does that apply to the work we do? We have to keep working on that. And so this is a big concentration for us in NATO. The second I of inclusiveness is about increasing numbers of women. And it's how do we encourage our national militaries, their national forces, to get more women into not only to be deployed, but into the national forces at home. But I do want to caution this because, and that I look at as one of the challenges, there is an overemphasis on counting numbers. And that we look at this in NATO, we don't have a quota on increasing numbers of women. What we want to do is change the baseline and the foundation so that we have sustainable action in terms of gender equality, so that we can actually see some change without it being sort of enforced in a way, but there's still accountability. I believe that we have to have an equal focus on integration and then inclusiveness. Because right now, all we're concentrating on, as the community largely, is on getting numbers. And on its own, that doesn't lead to success. So for us, it's a balanced approach between integration and inclusiveness. And then the third I, which is really important, is the I of integrity. And last year, NATO adopted its first policy on sexual exploitation and abuse. It's our first policy. We're very proud of that. It's not the first time, obviously, NATO has brought this into play because all of our national militaries have their codes of conduct. But it's the first time as an alliance that we've looked at this conduct and discipline in terms of sexual exploitation abuse, and that we have put it into the framework, and it is one of our Secretary General's priorities. So collectively, those 3 I's make up for us the women, peace and security agenda. And we are having actioned that in a number of ways already. By adopting new policies, putting a lot of focus on the emphasis where we haven't had much trajectory. We have gender advisors deployed in all our missions. We have integration in terms of the way we talk about operations in our emerging security challenges. So it's really has now embedded itself, I would say, that we are weaving through all of the work we have a gender perspective. And what's most important is that it is a priority. It's a priority for the Alliance. It's a priority for people working in the Alliance to see that gender and the way it works in connection to peace and security and defense and security, it is now a priority. And our Secretary General has made this very, very clear. This is a priority for him. In terms of what needs to change, a lot needs to change. And while we've been doing this 20 years as a community, we have a long way to go. And I think there's a great change has been seen by many organizations. But a couple of points I want to make in terms where I think there needs to be change. One, it needs to be understood this is not a woman's issue, and I'll say that issue. This is a security topic, and it is something that has to be dealt with in terms of security for all. And that we're not engaging women and women's voices in the conversation around security, that we need to have a better understanding of how security and defense is applied to women and men equally, and how women see security for themselves. And the word issue shouldn't be used anywhere near women, peace and security, because these aren't issues. These are real hard core topics that we need to advance. We need to stop fragmenting the agenda, that the agenda shouldn't be a division between protection and participation, but we need to come together to really advance the agenda as a whole. And that when you're pitting one part of the agenda against the other, all that does is everybody fails. So that we will say in NATO, there can be no protection without participation, that there has to be an equal measure on both sides. We also, again, and I mentioned this, refocus away just looking at parity. If you want to just count numbers, in the end, you just get numbers, you don't get equality. And we need to make sure that we understand that equality is about really putting it into policies, into practice, into programs, into making sure the voices are heard. And just because you increase numbers of women, automatically that doesn't happen. There's a lot of change has to take place. We have to also broaden the agenda to match the new realities of the world. Whereas women, peace and security, when we're talking about pandemics, something that we're seeing recently. Where are we when we're talking about the work of, and while it is in resolution 2242, broaden the idea of countering terrorism and working in those areas. And finally, we need to stop essentializing women. And the idea that women, the burden of women, peace and security is on women's shoulders, and that you deploy a woman and the world is going to be a better place. It doesn't happen as easy as that. And I think the idea that we put a lot of stress on women, that sexual exploitation abuse will end because more women are deployed. No, it happens because change comes, and change is hard to get, and we all together have to do it, men and women equally. And when we always put this agenda on the shoulders of women, ultimately, not only are you burdening women, but you're not seeing change anywhere. So that's a few things from my side.
Claire, thanks very much particularly for drawing the distinction between real substance and tokenism. I'd like to thank Claire, yourself, Charlotte, of course, in the second round. Before we turn to Parvi to draw some conclusions and look at the way ahead, we do now have some people who've put their hands up to ask questions, so I'll briefly go to the Q&A. Firstly, I'd like to turn to Fernando Aguiar, who represents our partner this evening. So, Fernando, I hope you're still there. And thereafter, Andri Sava. Andri, I hope you're there too. So please now, Fernando, unmute yourself and take the floor, please. And also, if your question is to one of our speakers in particular, it will be helpful to specify that. I see you're there, so the floor is yours, sir.
Hi, thank you very much for the opportunity to ask a question. Thank you. It's very, very nice to see so many familiar faces tonight. So Charlotte, Claire, Rosamilia, and Ilot, great to see you again. I do have a question. I don't have a specific question to a specific speaker. I'm more generally, so anyone can feel free to answer. But as we have been discussing, regional institutions may not always echo the precise language of the Women, Peace and Security resolutions, but there are nonetheless meaningful debates on gender inclusion and gender empowerment in local and regional peace and security institutions. So I was wondering, how can we advance such a discussion and focus more on the local participation so that we have more transformative action on the women, peace and security, and this is not being held hostage to international standards. So this is an open question to all the panel.
Okay, Fernando, thanks very much for that. Before I turn to the panelists, let's take Andre's question as well, and then I can ask various panelists who want to pick up either Fernando's remark or Andre's remark as they choose, a quick round of response, and then we can go on to Parvi. So please, Andre, if you're there, please manifest yourself. Yeah, you're there, unmuted as well. Fantastico. Over to you, please.
My question is general to all the speakers, and thank you very much for inviting us to this conference, which I can find it very inspiring tonight. My question is, 20 years after the passage of Resolution 1325, what remains the biggest challenge? Because for us in Cyprus, the biggest challenge is the completion of the first National Action Plan on 1325. And we are very proud that we will be ready before the end of the year. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for those two questions. They were general questions, so I imagine all five speakers, or four speakers who have spoken so far, might want to have a crack at that. So let me go in reverse order. Claire, in 2 sentences, how would you pick up either of those questions? Then I'll turn to Charlotte, Anilo, and to Rosa.
I think I'll focus on, again, some of the challenges and ultimately it's a lack of understanding, full understanding of the agenda, the lack of understanding how the agenda applies, and some of the narrative that kind of gets lost in translation. National action plans, absolutely, congratulations. We're looking forward to this. We have what, I think 93 now. But I do believe that the biggest obstacle is when you don't understand something, then you don't act on it. And the confusion of women, peace and security and what it means, it, to me, has been an obstacle for many, many years. So I'll just be very brief, and I know others want to jump in.
Thanks, Claire. And you certainly helped us to clarify that this evening. Charlotte, please, pick up anything that you'd like to in response to those 2 questions.
Yeah, I think that we really, as I said, need to make sure that, how should I say, the pyramid is perhaps turned upside down, but to make sure that colleagues and friends in conflict and post-conflict settings are given a stronger voice. And to make that happen, that also needs some sort of action or perhaps change behavior and listening from higher up in the pyramid, where sometimes I sense that there are also it's more populated in the top of the pyramid than in the bottom in terms of who is working with this. Big challenges are, as I said before, the fragmentation, both thematic, as Claire said, on parity versus agency versus protection, and it's a discussion, but it's sometimes not a useful discussion. So we need to build a bridge and to work comprehensively and holistically together as a community of practice. One challenge is this idea based on very much stereotypical thinking that if you bring women in, all these things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 will happen. This stereotypical trap is really a challenge and a problem, and we have to make sure that we base what we do on what we actually know in terms of facts and not on wishful thinking. And then finally, I wanted to say that we need also to make sure that there is a good balance between symbolic activities and activities that is directly affecting in a positive way women and girls and boys and men in conflict settings. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Ila and Rosa, as we're under time pressure, could I ask each of you maybe just to answer one of the questions, if you don't mind, that has a priority for you? Thank you.
I think I'm going to just to react to the question about the biggest challenge for the resolution itself after 20 years. I think the biggest challenge for me is implementation itself, because we are on a planet where we are, let's say, advancing in 2 speeds. So there are those countries where they have made progress, but when I'm talking about Congo, I think we have made less progress. So that's why I'm saying that the problem for us, for the Democratic Republic of Congo, for instance, is implementation. Thank you.
Thanks very much. That is probably a 4th eye that we could add to Claire's list of 3 eyes. And then finally for this round, Rosa Emilia, please, would you respond to just one of the questions that you felt resonated most with you?
No, yes, I think that it's implementation. I think that we have to go forward for localization of all these policies and really make them a discussion, a more practical discussion. There is a universe of distance between what is in the discussion of the global institutions and the local institutions. So localization is one of the things that we are challenged with. And the other one is, yes, we can have action plans. but we really need to have monitoring of what I've just said, all what means gender for a better society in security.
Yeah. Thanks. It's implementation, and it has to have an impact on the ground. Thank you very much. I now turn back to London to Elena, who's going to introduce our last speaker. So, Elena, back to you. Thank you.
Yes, so we've been talking about Resolution 1325 and the implications of 20 years since its first adoption and all the resolutions that have come behind it. So we couldn't do this without talking about the role of the UN in all of this and the work that the UN has done in the Women, Peace and Security agenda. So our final panelist is Päivi Kanisto. She's the chief of the Peace and Security section at UN Women. Päivi has over 20 years of experience working on issues related to development and gender equality. And she has worked both in Africa and Europe. And she has also served as a gender advisor for the Finnish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Päivi, I think you know what question comes to you now. It's if you could give us a short overview of the role of the UN, of the work that the UN has done during the past 20 years since the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda, and maybe you would like to share some good practices with us to lift the spirit and see that things are going well in a sense, and what is the way that you see forward. If I could ask you to also be a bit brief. I know I asked you several questions, but maybe be a bit brief because we are running out of time, sadly.
Thank you, Elena, and very humbling to come after such a knowledgeable panel. Indeed, I have privilege of working with these people, knowledgeable experts in different occasions. So coming to the first 20 years of Women, Peace and Security agenda, what you have heard here in the discussion, there is nowadays attention to sexual violence in conflict. When I started on this agenda, indeed also about 18 years ago, sexual violence was a taboo and you were not allowed to even talk about it, didn't exist. So I'm really glad it's changed, and it needs to continue to get focus. But what is still very much missing is women's participation. You have heard that is not recognized as the same way. And then women's role in reconstruction. And especially, maybe I would say the biggest challenge is that what women and women's organizations in conflict areas do to prevent conflict. And this is not to prevent things for women, this is to prevent it for the whole society. So that hasn't been recognized. And Claire is absolutely right. I mean, these are not, one area doesn't exclude the other, they all need to go hand in hand. So what is missing is leadership, accountability, and funding for this agenda to happen. In the United Nations, okay, you have heard how well the so-called normative agenda has progressed, and it's been great. Last year, Secretary General, UN Secretary General, he listed 10 directives to the UN system and promising to implement these. That was in his report to the Security Council. So I'm asking this audience, hold the UN accountable for delivering what was promised in that report. There was 10 recommendations for the member states and 7 for the Security Council. So those would be the recommendations, hoping that everyone will look at. But I would say that in the United Nations nowadays, you have heard there is attention to women, peace and security. Gender advisors, as Claire well knows, are nowadays in most difficult conflict situations and most difficult political situations. There's an informal experts group advising Security Council. So Security Council is seeking voluntary information about women, peace and security before they make decisions. I would like to say some good practices, and one good practice, and I would like to congratulate many member states for doing that, is establishing the focal points network on women, peace and security. That puts peer pressure among countries to implement women, peace and security. And we have heard about national action plans, and they are a good mechanism at country level. They need to just come with national budget and plan to implement. So to finish, what I would like to say that UN is there, UN continues to provide guidance, and we are lucky to have a Secretary General who makes an effort to hold the leadership, UN leadership accountable. Member states, you need to hold the Secretary General accountable. So I'm hoping that you will help with managing, I mean, UN should be managing resources for women, peace and security, and UN, United Nations system should be helping guiding the resources towards the implementation of this agenda. There is Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund. There is a Peace Building Fund, which is channeling nowadays 40% to gender equality purposes. But there needs to be much more direct support, and there needs to be support also. The member states need to allocate funding for this agenda. And there needs to be leadership. There needs to be leadership in the United Nations. There needs to be leadership at the level of each country. And every government is responsible to citizens for implementing the women, peace and security agenda. So saying there are good tools for that, so let's use them. Let UN be your partner. We are happy to collaborate there, and also collaborating with regional organizations. So it's great. So basically that's what I would like to say.
Thank you,
especially during this COVID now, provide leadership and political will, make sure there is accountability, and funding tells you and resources tell you if you are doing it or not. If you don't have any resources for it, you are not doing it. Thank you.
Pavi, thank you very much indeed. And now, Pavi, there is a question also that we still have to take from Samantha Turner. Samantha, I hope you have stayed with us online, and thank you for your patience. If you are still there, please manifest yourself, unmute, and put your question to Pavi, or if it was to one of the other speakers, then please specify that for us. Thank you. Over to you.
Sure. Thank you so much for having us today. My name is Samantha Turner. I'm from the U.S. European Command, and I had a question that Pavi can take a shot at. I would be very interested to hear what it is that she has to think about it from her vantage point. Given the varied amount of subdisciplines that Charlotte had mentioned earlier, how do you think that we could bring the lived experiences of women peacekeepers who have participated in the security sector into the broader conversation of women, peace and security and moving our goals forward? Thank you.
Samantha, thank you very much indeed. So Pavi, yes, that was a question that seemed to be directed to you wonderfully,
okay.
Because you're there. So please go ahead.
Okay, so just wanted to say that there exists nowadays something called the ELSI initiative, the aim of which is to increase the number and share of women as peacekeepers, and before that you need to increase number and share of women in the national security structures. So they have identified barriers why women don't progress in their careers so much in the security services and end up being but so I think, let me say that some of the things linked to structures and mechanisms and also good brotherhoods in these systems. But let me say that, for example, something like a COVID pandemic now has asked us to define again what is security. And I'm hoping we're taking this opportunity and to see how we can understand security in the modern world and who needs to provide that. So peacekeeping operations are currently distributing soap to communities in most affected areas. It doesn't need to be I'm sorry, just a man in a military uniform with 25 years of work experience to reach out to local populations. So you can think who are the best place to reach people and bring security and feeling of security. Thank you.
Pavi, thank you very much. Well, we are unfortunately out of time, and therefore with apologies to anybody who still wanted to come in, but we have had in a very short 60 minutes, a very intense 60 minutes, a very intense debate, some frank exchanges and frank conversations. So my own take, before I pass over to Elena to wrap up and conclude, is that the glass is definitely half full. We've heard about so many different initiatives in so many different places, some top down, some more bottom up. But it's obviously clear that unfortunately all of this action still has got to get fully to grips with the dimension of the problem. But one thing that I picked up is the need for a narrative that positions this as truly a human security challenge, which requires a fully comprehensive approach of so many different sectors. As it was said, bringing them around the table, making them to work together is always a challenge, but ever necessary. I heard a lot about also the need for things to happen at the local level if they're to be real at the end of the day, and therefore how do we take all of these resolutions, all of these good initiatives, and turn them into specific local actions, adapted of course to local circumstances. But I also heard about the 3 I's, which provide for inclusiveness, provide for integrity, and provide for integration, to which again I also would add the 4th I of implementation. So the roadmap is clearly there to make further progress, and therefore I would definitely not endorse that 19th century Vietnamese diplomat who said that the situation is desperate but not serious. The situation may be desperate, but it is indeed very serious, and we've heard from 5 leaders this evening on how serious action can be carried forward, but it needs all of us to participate in that effort. From my side, to the 5 leaders that we had with us this evening, thank you so much for all of your time, wisdom and expertise. I certainly benefited, and I'm sure that everybody who joined us this evening, and I thank you, joined us too. But over to Elena to have the final thought and the final word, and to wrap it all up for us this evening. Elena.
Thanks, Jamie. You made a perfect summary of the discussions. So I would only like to say that, yes, I mean, now we're living in a time where we can hear more voices every time, especially in the younger generation, saying that we've had enough, that there's no way forward without inclusion and diversity, and that we really need to make sure that all the women, peace and security agenda and all the policies that advocates for inclusion and diversity are not only, you know, a statement of good intentions, but that we actually implement them and make sure it is a reality. So I would like to thank you all for joining us. Thank all the wonderful speakers we had today that are actually working on this and are trying to make the One Peace, Security and Agenda a reality. And thank you all for joining. Please do look at Friends of Europe website to see our upcoming events. We would be delighted to welcome you all again. And that's all. Have a lovely evening and goodbye.
So farewell from both of us, and see you at the next Friends of Europe event. Stay safe in the meantime, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Ellen.